He knows customer experience is brand experience. From Uber, here's Ian Chi. And from Hill Holliday, please welcome Jamie Shai.
All right. So I want to frame our conversation today with 3 quick stats that may seem like they have nothing in common, but I hope over the course of the next 15 minutes we can uncover a theme that really relates to them. The first is that the processor in the new iPhone 7 is more powerful than the processor in the current generation of the MacBook Air, which is, of course, a full-fledged laptop that was released just 18 months ago. Second is that Google just released a study that found that 53%, more than half of mobile web visitors, will abandon a page if it takes more than 3 seconds to load. They also found in the same study that the average website takes 14 seconds to load. Not a surprise. The third is that it took Hilton Hotels 97 years to have 1 million rooms in their hotel portfolio. It took Airbnb 7 years to achieve the same milestone. So, although they seem like they have nothing in common, I think they all relate to our topic today, which is customer experience, and really the imperative there to take this seriously. And Ian, I want to start, maybe as we always should, with the customer, and talk a little bit about how customer expectations are changing, not just how they've changed, but that they're changing at kind of an amazing rate.
Yeah,
what do you see when you look at how the customer expectation landscape is changing?
it's some of it's expectations, some of it's just the new normal, right? I was actually talking to someone on my team who was employee number 9 at Uber, and we were talking about, like, how has it changed? And he talked to me about the idea that when Uber first started, we were so used to kind of standing in the rain, waiting 15 minutes for a cab. It was totally normal, right? So when Uber came in 12 minutes, 13 minutes, we'd all be fine. We'd all be like, cool, that's really nice. I'm so glad that I could wait inside. But today, if anything is under 6 minutes, 7 minutes, the drop-off rates are increasingly going up. And people's expectations are shifting in real time, right? The new normals, when I used to work with Intel, they used to talk about new normals, and new normals are being created every day, and at such an exponential pace. And people's expectations are just not what they used to be. And I think that's a really incredible dynamic that we're living in today.
Yeah. So Uber just launched a new version of the app.
Yeah.
I used it this morning to get over here. It's great.
Do you like it?
It's faster. Can you talk about kind of what led to that, what you saw in your own customers' expectations and how they were changing, maybe the data that led to some of the decisions that went into that?
I mean, at the end of the day, a large part of the brand team that I'm on kind of worked on that, right? And was about really building that out along with the product teams, along with everyone else. And at the end of the day, it's about the customer's experience. And over time, what basically happened is that we built innovations on top of innovations, new products, and it completely cluttered the experience. So at the end of the day, what do people want? They want their time back, they want simplicity, they want to get to where they want to go. So this redesign was about really taking it down to its bare bones and giving back to people what they originally intended and wanted. And also, I think it's really interesting in the context of how we talk about brand, how we actually think about it, how we build it. When I started my career 15, 16 years ago, it was, when we talked about brand, it was like, let's put a bunch of logos on a wall and let's see what's pretty. And let's talk about the logos and the typeface, and let's look at the print ads and see how that all fits together. And today, a large part of the team is around the product. It's really around the experience itself, and the application is just an extension of that. It's the extension of that experience. And the experience of the brand is almost as important, if not more, than what it looks like, what it feels like, and what it is in the world.
Yeah, because Uber, like a lot of startups, didn't advertise for a long time, right? I think you just started this summer maybe doing some more formal advertising.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's understandable you're a startup, but at the same time, what do you think for companies that maybe don't have the kind of customer experience that Uber is known for? Does it make sense to be spending money on advertising when your customer experience may be broken? I mean, it's something obviously that you're focused on doing both in parallel, but how do you think about that?
There's a role for, I look at everything as a toolkit, right? There's a role for everything. I don't think TV advertising is going away anytime soon. We're launching television ads. All those things have a role and have a purpose. But it's really always looking at it through the customer experience, looking at the touch points, looking at what really engages with people and why. And not just starting with the tool itself, but starting with the intent. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a large problem that happens still in marketing and advertising, everything that we do, is that we start with the tool. We start with, hey, we need a film. And you don't know how many times I have this conversation. I go, why? well, we're trying to achieve this goal, we're trying to achieve this problem, we're trying to circumnavigate this thing. And I go, well, a film is not going to do that for you. You really should be thinking about your SEO. You really should be thinking about the behavior that you're exhibiting within the application. Your customer experience is broken. Someone is not engaging with your customer in the right way. And that's going to go a lot further than developing a film. But the psychology and what we're taught is still, you know, what is that quote? Like, if you had a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
When you have TV ads, everything looks like a film. So I think that paradigm is changing, and starting with the problem and starting with what resolves that problem, I think is much more important in today's world. Because frankly, our toolkits have expanded so dramatically. Like, my job was so much easier when I started because you only had 5 tools, so you use them. Now when you have like 1,000, it's hard to decide what to start with, right? So starting with the problem, I think, is increasingly more important.
It seems like there's kind of a fundamental shift there in terms of even just what you measure as a marketer or what you optimize for, in the sense that, you know, when you're thinking in the context of film, you're measuring things like engagement. How much time are people spending with my brand? Whereas what you're talking about, and the way that Uber seems to approach it, is how much time can we give back to people in order to streamline their day and actually allow them to do what they want to do.
Right, because that's the ultimate goal, right? It's to improve the customer's experience.
I mean, it seems like the app, I mean, we're talking minor improvements, you know, half a second, milliseconds here and there, but it makes a big difference, right? In terms of
if you add up, and not just in the app itself, right? We're constantly assessing the entire experience cycle, from drivers to riders, on the eat side, looking at how we engage with restaurants, how we engage with people. Because if you're not constantly optimizing, if you're not constantly, when I took this job, like one of the questions I got asked is like, why would you do this? Why would you want to come here? It's because the problem is so deep. It's so infinite, right? There's so many different touch points. There's so many things to play around with, and it's constantly iterating. It's constantly changing. So really understanding all those things and optimizing them is like a daily goal. And then knowing when to say stop, let's just reinvent the whole thing, is often a key challenge too. And that's what I love about the job, and that's what I love about the people that I work with. It's the psychology. Like, it really treasures hustling. It really treasures toe stepping and pushing, and really regenerating what is already there. Because at the end of the day, it's with the pre-existing knowledge that none of this existed 5 years ago. Right? There was no Uber. It was a reinvention of a paradigm. And if you're not constantly reinventing that paradigm, you're watching customers' expectations grow, and you'd actually constantly think about what's next. Because if you're not doing that, it's kind of, you know, you're going to be left behind at some point.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when Uber first came to Boston, probably around 5 years ago, and now you're in, how many countries are you in today?
Cities, I think it's 500 plus.
Okay. So it seems like there must be something, to your point, that's really foundational about the organization that allows you to have a mindset towards growth and innovation and reinvention at the scale that you started at, and now at this global scale that you're operating at and continuing to excel at. Right. What does that look like in terms of the culture every day?
I still remember working with multiple past businesses, and I'm not going to name any names, but like there was this kind of funny thing where there were these extremely long planning cycles. They would be like months on end where you're just thinking about the problem and thinking about the problem, overanalyzing it. And analysis is important, data is important, information is important, but also doing things and getting things into the market is really important. Because what is the ultimate test, right? You throw it out there, you see how it's working. If it sucks, you take it off, right? And the cost of entry has been so low now that you can do that. Where I think there's like oftentimes a problem in corporate culture where there's like an urgency in planning, and like this feeling that you're doing a lot because you thought about it a lot. And I think the one biggest distinction I've learned at working at Uber is that you just got to ship things. You got to just make things happen. And when you make things happen, then you figure out if it actually works, and you test it, and you learn through that process. So I think that kind of thinking, that kind of hustle is kind of embedded in the culture and embedded in the way that, and there's so many quirky examples of how I experienced that in the time that I've been there.
I think that proliferation of choice is a really interesting thing as well. So customer expectations are going up. They have more choices. I mean, you see that in any category, and really every category is competing with Uber on customer experience in the sense that customers carry their expectations with them, right? But you look at something like financial services and the explosion of fintech, and there's just a revolution there in a category that typically had really high barriers to entry, right?
Right.
So how do you generate and sort of sustain loyalty with customers when there are so many choices as to where they could go for whatever category they're looking for?
I mean, it's not as much as possible and pushing, and a lot of the work that the team is embarking on is how do you actually refine and really put people at the top. Like one of my favorite old school examples, I don't know if people remember this, was AmericanAirlines.com back in the day. A designer went in there and did an op-ed where he wrote about how broken the website was. There was like freight on the front page. It was extremely difficult, and ultimately, he wrote this op-ed that said, you know, why is AmericanAirlines.com so horrible? Let me redesign it. What do people want? They want to book a flight. They want to check their loyalty program. They want to check in, right? Why isn't that all surfaced up, and why isn't that at the top of the experience? And I think American Airlines wrote back and was like, well, you don't understand the complexities of our business. You don't understand like all the constituents I have to go to make this happen. And at the end of the day, your customer doesn't care, right? Like they don't care that you have all these political issues. They don't care about your bureaucracy. They only care about the experience. Mm-hmm. And I think being fundamentally focused on that, obsessed with that experience and figuring out how to siphon for it, I think builds that loyalty over time. And then constantly thinking about how you innovate, because yes, you can build loyalty programs. That's one part of it, mm-hmm. But loyalty is ultimately built through like kind of long-term experiences that are really positive and engaging.
Are there larger, more established brands that you think are doing that well? I mean, the airline industry is kind of easy to pick on, but are there others that you think have adopted a similar mindset or have partnered and found success in this realm?
In terms of like really large brands that have adopted?
In terms of embracing, or at least being more reactive to this environment of increased customer expectations and more choice. Like I think about just Uberization as a concept. I mean, you've achieved verb status, which is pretty incredible, but it's hard to miss the Rocket Mortgage commercials that were in the Super Bowl and are now everywhere. That's a big company making a big bet on push button get mortgage, which is essentially Uber for mortgages. Are there bigger competitors or bigger brands that you think are doing this well?
That's a good question. I mean, I love what. It depends on how you define a big brand, right? Mm-hmm. If you're defining it by like market cap, if you're defining it by like resonance, if you're defining it by like years in market, I think one of the biggest problems with bigger brands is like the infrastructure that's built around it and how you have to like break down that infrastructure, because it means politically a lot of things, a lot of upheaval, a lot of like change that you need to actually create. Mm-hmm. I always love, I mean, I don't know if this is a big brand, but I love like what Airbnb does, and they're constantly reinventing themselves. They're thinking about how they're pushing out their product. Mm-hmm. I love how they do that, and they're constantly thinking about the customer's experience first. It's hard to say, because I think every brand is kind of doing it in their own way, and there's like a need, especially in the hospitality industry. I think a lot of hotel companies understanding the impact of Airbnb and reinventing their product proposition in order to do that. How nimble it will be is yet to be seen, because I haven't seen anyone really kind of flip their entire business model to adapt to the new age. But I think people are getting there slowly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have a couple minutes left. I want to kind of return to the theme of this whole event, which is looking towards the future. Yeah. So 60 years ago or so, the average corporate lifespan of a company in the S&P 500 was about 62 years. Yeah. And this year it's around 12.
Right.
There's a lot of reasons that that's changed so dramatically, but if you sort of look around the corner from where you sit and how you see the landscape, what's your prognosis for companies that don't make customer experience a priority in 2020, over the next 10 years?
I mean, I think the biggest difference is like infrastructure can't hold up businesses like they used to, right? In the past, if you held a brick and mortar infrastructure, you were the largest retailer and that was it, right? Mm-hmm. And we can see how like business models like Blockbuster can simply go away because of a disruption like Netflix, right? So there's a shift, and the companies I think that are going to stay around are the ones who approach change with a sense of urgency. I was reading something with Microsoft recently and Ballmer, and like thinking about like, was that a good CEO or a bad CEO? And it was kind of a really interesting op-ed, and it was based on the idea that the company has grown and the business has grown, but it's missed some of the major technology cycles of the past 10 years, mm-hmm. right? Cloud computing, mobile platforms, things of that nature. So I think the companies that are willing to take risks, because you kind of have to step out of your comfort zone in 2016. Like you can't do what you've always done and be satiated by. There's very few businesses, unless you're selling air and water and you're the only distributor.
Yep.
There's very few businesses that can kind of sustain a model where you're doing the same thing over and over again and repeating that year on year and expecting the same level of growth. It just doesn't exist. So even in the way that Uber thinks and how we build and all that kind of stuff, it's with that future in mind.
Great. All right, Ian, thank you very much.
Cool.